The sun dipped low on the horizon, spilling molten gold across the desert sands, turning the barren landscape into a canvas of fire and shadow. She had never ventured this far from the familiarity of her home, nor imagined herself in a place so untamed. The desert had a quiet menace to it, a way of whispering secrets to those who dared to listen, and tonight every step she took seemed heavier than the last. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the wind, a frantic beat she couldn't suppress. She was afraid of the unknown, of what lay ahead, and of the man who had appeared seemingly out of nowhere to rescue her from circumstances she could barely recall without shivering. He moved with a quiet authority, each step measured and deliberate, yet fluid, as though he belonged to the land itself. There was a wildness about him, a raw intensity that both frightened and captivated her. His eyes, dark and penetrating, held stories she could not even begin to guess. Yet beneath that stormy exterior, there was a tenderness she caught in fleeting moments. Small gestures, the way his hand lingered just slightly on the edge of hers, the softness in his voice when he reassured her. She wanted to trust him, but fear clung stubbornly to her like sand to skin. "Stay close," he instructed, his tone gentle yet firm, the kind that brooked no argument. The desert stretched endlessly, an ocean of dunes and jagged cliffs, and she felt both vulnerable and strangely exhilarated. She obeyed instinctively, drawn to him as though the desert itself was nudging her forward, guiding her steps. Every glance he cast her way seemed charged with meaning, and though she did not understand it, she felt it deep in her chest, a connection that defied explanation. As they climbed a narrow trail leading to a cliff overlooking a vast canyon, the wind picked up, tugging at her hair and sending shivers down her spine. She wrapped her arms around herself, partly from the chill and partly from anticipation. He noticed and draped a blanket over her shoulders without a word, the warmth seeping into her through her clothes, melting some of the tension that had knotted her muscles. She looked at him, her eyes searching for answers, for reassurance, and he met her gaze with a steady intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You're safe with me," he murmured, almost to himself. But she heard it. There was a gravity in his tone, an unspoken promise that cut through the fear and hesitation. She wanted to believe him, desperately, and something in the way he watched over her made her feel she could. It was not just words, there was substance, a silent assurance that he would not let harm come to her, that he would guard her fiercely against the world's dangers. Night fell swiftly in the desert, swallowing the golden hues of the sun and replacing them with a vast expanse of stars. The air cooled, and the desert became alive with sound. The whisper of the wind, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft scurrying of nocturnal creatures across the sand. They stopped at a small secluded plateau where he began to set up a fire. The flames licked the night sky, casting flickering shadows that danced across his rugged features, highlighting the sharp planes of his face and the intensity in his eyes. She watched him silently, mesmerized by the calm authority in every movement, the way he seemed to belong to the night itself. He offered her a place beside the fire, a blanket, and a small nod of encouragement. She accepted it hesitantly, feeling the warmth of the flames and the proximity of his presence, an unspoken comfort in the quiet moments. He sat opposite her, studying her in the firelight, his gaze both protective and inquisitive, as though he were trying to understand the depths of her soul without needing her to speak. She felt herself relaxing slightly, the fear slowly giving way to curiosity, and perhaps something more profound, something that stirred in her chest like a spark waiting to ignite. "You must be wondering why I brought you here," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying over the crackle of the fire. There was no judgment in his tone, only an acknowledgement of the unspoken questions she carried. She nodded, unable to find words, and he continued. "This place, it's harsh. It doesn't forgive mistakes easily, but it teaches you things about strength, about patience, about who you really are. I brought you here because I believe you need to see that, to understand it, and perhaps because I need you to see it with me." His words were measured, deliberate, yet there was an underlying emotion she couldn't quite place. She felt the warmth of the fire spread through her, mingling with the tension in her body, creating a cocktail of fear, longing, and anticipation she did not know how to process. She studied him, trying to read the layers of his personality, the storms hidden behind those dark eyes. There was danger there, yes, but there was also a rare tenderness, a depth that intrigued her more than it frightened her. She realized that her own curiosity was becoming stronger than her fear, that something about him was pulling her into a world she had never imagined but secretly longed to explore. He spoke of the stars then, pointing out constellations and weaving stories of warriors, lovers, and lost civilizations. She listened, captivated by his voice, the way it carried authority without arrogance, passion without recklessness. Each story seemed to breathe life into the night, painting the desert with legends and memories. She laughed softly at one tale, the sound surprising even her, and he smiled faintly in response, a small acknowledgement that she had reached him, even in some small, intangible way. Hours passed, the fire burning low, the embers casting a dim, steady glow. He remained near, a silent sentinel in the darkness, and she felt the weight of his presence, protective, commanding, yet somehow comforting. She realized that trust was not something to demand. It was something to earn, and in the span of a single evening he had earned a measure of it from her. It was in the careful gestures, the quiet attentiveness, the way he seemed attuned not just to her safety but to her emotions, her hesitations, the smallest shifts in her expression. The desert night pressed in around them, vast and infinite, yet she no longer felt alone. The fear that had gripped her earlier had begun to loosen, replaced by something fragile yet undeniable. A sense of connection, of being understood without needing to explain herself. He spoke little, but when he did, every word was measured, significant, resonating with meaning she could feel more than understand. There was a magnetism in him, a pull she could not resist, drawing her closer not through force but through presence, through the quiet power of being fully engaged in the moment with her. Eventually, silence fell between them, the kind of silence that is not empty, but full of possibilities, full of tension, full of unspoken words that linger in the air like sparks waiting to ignite. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she allowed herself to consider the idea that perhaps she had been searching for this, someone who could see her, truly see her, and accept her in all her complexities. And in the way he looked at her, steady and unwavering, she felt the faintest echo of hope. "Rest," he said finally, his voice gentle, almost a whisper against the night. "Tomorrow is another day and you'll need your strength. I'll be here." He draped the blanket more securely around her shoulders, and she felt the heat of his body nearby, a reassuring presence in the cool night. The gesture was simple yet loaded with meaning, a silent promise, a shield against the fears that lingered at the edges of her consciousness. She nodded, words failing her but understanding passing between them in a quiet, unspoken agreement. As she lay down beside the fire, the desert stretching endlessly around them, she reflected on the events that had brought her here. It was a night of firsts, a night that would remain etched in her memory forever. Fear, anticipation, curiosity, and something more. A spark of connection she could neither name nor fully comprehend, intertwined in a delicate dance. She realized that her journey was just beginning, that the challenges ahead would test her courage, her heart, and perhaps the very essence of who she was. He watched over her still, a silent guardian, his silhouette framed by the dying embers of the fire. She felt safe, though she knew danger lurked in the world beyond this plateau, and yet in his presence she discovered a strength she had not known she possessed. Passion, she realized, was not always fiery and reckless. Sometimes it was quiet, steady, and unwavering, a force that could protect, inspire, and transform. She drifted into a restless sleep, thoughts mingling with dreams of distant lands and untold stories while he remained vigilant, ensuring that nothing disturbed the fragile peace of the night. The desert, vast and indifferent, bore witness to a connection that was unfolding, an unspoken promise between two souls who had been drawn together by circumstance, chance, and something far deeper than either could explain. And for those watching this story, remember, moments like these are rare, precious, and unforgettable. There's more to discover, more to experience, and more to feel. Subscribe now to follow the journey, because every heartbeat, every glance, every word matters. The story has only just begun, and the adventure waiting ahead is unlike anything you've seen before.